When you push through those barriers, because it's a situation you've never been in before, it's a massive step out of your comfort zone. But when you push through those barriers that you're feeling, actually, could you take gentle steps towards something slightly different that could be deeply healing, like spending time with your loved one, whether it's when they're dying or whether it's after they've passed? Hey, I'm Tanya Wilkinson, and this is Death on the Daily, bringing the conversation about death out of the shadows and into the mainstream. Because along with birth and change, if there's one thing that's going to happen to us all, then death is it. And we're going to explore how death actually shows up for us on the daily in a multitude of ways, and how when we allow ourselves to accept and to be with death, how it can teach us a whole heap about how to live this life well. So welcome to my second solo Notes to Self episode. These episodes are going to be accompanying my chats with my guests. And in these episodes, what I'm going to be doing is really sharing my personal integrations from our conversations, a little bit more around my personal journey, as well as really practical tips that you can take away to help you to go deeper into this space of death on the daily. And so in today's episode, after my incredible conversation with Trikar, if you haven't checked it out, make sure you go and watch it or listen to it, because it literally had me beaming from ear to ear for the whole of the conversation. I think that conversation was a real embodiment that actually conversations about death, they can be really empowering and curiously joyful and curiously funny. So yeah, if you haven't checked it out, go and do it. But in today's episode, what I really want to root us into is continuing the conversation that I started with Tree, which was really around how we can become more accepting of, and just in general, okay with death. Now, why this is important is because we live in such a, well, particularly in Western culture, we're really death phobic. We've pushed it into the shadows. As Tree and I were laughing about, it's almost, and I've experienced this, for example, when I speak to my grief of losing my daughter, people just disappear as if it's infectious, as if me talking to it will cause something to happen, in their lives. But actually, the reality is death is in all of us, because everything in this life is impermanent, because we've been built on nature's cycles within which we, start at birth and we go all the way through to death. And then that cycle starts again with the birth and the rebirth. But actually, in our modern culture, the hospitalization of death, pushing it into the medical system, taking it out of our homes, as well as, so much of death being so sort of taboo to speak to, and people feeling really, really uncomfortable to just hold conversations in this space, is just compounding into, an era where we are truly disconnected from a huge part of what it is to be a human of nature. And that is the autumn, the dying, and the winter parts of our life cycle, which is the death. So I wanted to share with you a few practical ways based upon my journeys, based upon the work with my clients, based upon me just generally being a bit of a death and a grief geek and reading many, many books and speaking to many people through this podcast. I thought I'd share a few practical ways of just how you can start taking those little baby steps into accepting and just being with death. So I'm going to start with how you can create a practice of death on the daily. Now, this podcast is called Death on the Daily for good reason, because I believe that it's really, really important for us to create a practice of rooting into death on the daily. And that actually when we do, it really, truly does teach us how to live this life well. So where did I start? And it was with nature. And Tree also mentioned this in our conversation. So my first tip is let nature be your teacher. So for all of us in the Northern Hemisphere, we are soon to come into autumn. That's the equinox is next month. And this is a really powerful time where you can observe the dying and the letting go in nature's seasons. So my advice is just through the seasons of autumn and winter, and you can start now, because I always observe as of July the wildflowers, they start dying back, and you slowly see everything as it starts slowing down. At the moment I'm watching my veg patch and I'm saying, okay, the tomatoes, their growth is slowing down and soon they're going to be dying back. So get yourself out in nature on the daily and just see where you can connect into dying and death as it is around you. Then I'd also say, secondly, is looking for any other endings in your life that you can connect into, and connect into them from that, the beauty of them, the meaning of them, but also the complex emotions that maybe come through with them. So I think for me, even when I think to my birthday every single year, and this is actually something that I speak to in an upcoming episode with the amazing Lucy Sheridan, birthdays can be really meaningful milestones. And actually for me, that is a real marking. It's the ending of me being a certain age and all of the wishes and the hopes that I had in that year. And sometimes that can feel a little bit tinged with sadness. So connect into any endings in your life, and even, for example, for any sports fans, anyone who's watching this can see I'm wearing, well, you might not be able to see because it's under my hair. I'm wearing a Lakers jacket, and that's from the NBA Finals 1987, which was the year after I was born. And even in that, everything comes to an ending. Championship sports teams, if I think in Formula One, there's eras that end. Just connect into any of those endings in life and any of the meaning that you hold within those endings. And next, I would say, start talking about death. Talk about it with your friends, with your family. It's really not as scary as it sounds. And if it's something that you've never been comfortable speaking to, maybe there's just always that big gaping gap whenever it comes to death, and yourself or those around you want to get off the conversation as quickly as possible. I can empathize with that, because that was me. That's my family. That is just generally how I moved through this life until I accompanied my granddad in his final chapter. And as Tree shared, it can be really, really empowering, in fact, to have conversations about our own wishes in that eventuality when we are dying and at our death. Questions to ask yourself is, what do you want to be surrounded by? Like, who do you want in the room? Who is most important to you? People and pets. Where do you want to be? For me, it's very much nature. I want to be, if I'm not able to be out in nature, I want to be looking out into nature. I certainly don't want to be in a hospital if I can avoid it. What smells, what music, what food, what drinks, really, really get creative here. I'm going to quote Tree here. She said a really profound quote that actually, in doing that exercise herself, she really rooted into how important nature is in her life, because that was front and center of what's most important for her at her ending. And so her quote was, if that's what you want in death, that's what you want in life. So I've created a little prompt to help you in exploring this topic. And the prompt says, in my final days on this planet, who and what will I prioritize? And as you journal, just see as well what lessons this brings in how you need to live your life every day. What did you say that you'd prioritize in those final days that actually you're not prioritizing now and that you need to? Next up, I wanted to share a few practical tips for when you're navigating dying, death, and bereavement of those who you love. And if you are, I start this by just sending you all of my love. And obviously, this is a resource as well that if you listen to this, that you could come back to, that you could share with friends and family to support them in these moments. This is really my intention of Death on the Daily in these conversations. And these are some practices that have really, really helped me. So firstly, and this was in the dying period for my granddad. So that was across a year where I went to visit him in his care home. And the one lesson that I took from that is really the power when we can find rituals that root us into presence. And this is really simple and yet so profound, because actually, when it's difficult, when we're watching someone, so my granddad had dementia, and so it was a really painful death to witness. And actually in my episode with Katie Gray, we speak to that journey and both of our journeys with my granddad and with Katie's mum, who's got dementia. And what I did every week when I went to see him in his care home, because it was really, really hard to watch, I stopped. There was a little river just outside the care homes. This is where Nature Connection comes into it again. And I stopped at that river every single time. And I took a moment's pause and I looked onto the river and I set my intention, which was to be fully present with my nan, who's still with us, and my granddad, with a very specific intention to meet them exactly where they are. And knowing, well, I say knowing, I learned this through my experience with them, that even when they're in pain, my presence brings them love and comfort. Me being there all in it and not distracting myself on my phone, just sitting with them. And sometimes, I'd sit and have a nap on my nan's shoulder and she'd sleep as well. And, I'd just sit there, just holding my granddad's hand and we'd both stare out of the window. That is the most powerful and profound thing that we can do. Gift someone as well as ourselves our presence. Now, my next tip is taking it step by step, because actually in our death phobic culture where we push death into the shadows, we are very avoidant of death and talking about it and being with it. Tree talked about being with a dead body, but actually, and I learned this when I did my death doula training, I learned that when it comes to death, you actually have time to make decisions. And where our instant reaction might be, for example, oh my goodness, take the body away, I don't want to see them. Could you take just a little bit of time, talk it through, again, that power of conversation and connection with those who you love. Talk it through to understand, actually, when you push through those barriers, because it's a situation you've never been in before, it's a massive step out of your comfort zone. But when you push through those barriers that you're feeling, actually, could you take gentle steps towards something slightly different that could be deeply healing, like spending time with your loved one, whether it's when they're dying or whether it's after they've passed. Now, my next tip is be curious. Ask lots of questions and really start your own death on the daily conversations, if you can, in these moments where you're also navigating it. And for me, what that was actually in my grandparents' care home. It was just being really curious and asking lots of questions. I asked heaps of questions around dementia, around dying, around what it's typically like. And actually that curiosity really served me well, because I just went into that whole experience with an open heart and understanding that, yes, as I cross each threshold of new experiences, yes, of course, it brings up huge amounts, but actually, how can I stay curious? How can I stay open-minded? And how can I just be present as much as possible with what is? And if you're curious around the stories of dying and death, I would recommend Catherine Mannix's book, With the End in Mind. I inhaled that book in my granddad's final year. Literally, I think I read it in about 2 days, which was at the time for me, because I was working on my reading, was actually really, really fast. My attention span had been completely demolished through social media. Really powerful, and it brings a lot of comfort to understand that, as Tree shared, the Hollywood version of death isn't actually the reality. So be curious and ask questions as they come up for you. There's plenty of people, particularly, who are supporting people at the end of life, who are very, very open to have these conversations. And my final point is just be compassionate to yourself. Give yourself grace, give yourself space, and know as well, the topic of death and dying, it brings up a lot. So actually, if you do disconnect, that's totally okay. Sometimes our body is doing what it needs to do in that moment. But if you can just try to bring yourself back into that presence and just take it step by step. And also, in any moment when you are navigating, the physical dying and death of someone who we love, or, navigating a really difficult ending, for example, the ending of a relationship, it's really, really important to root into self-care. Really, really do take care of yourself and make sure that you are prioritizing filling up your own cup in these moments. So those are just a few ways that I've really, really found, I suppose, my heart-centered courage. A lot of people say, oh my goodness, your journey and how you navigated it with your granddad and with your daughter. Wow, your strength. And actually for me, I don't see myself as strong. I just see myself as connected into a part of the human experience that just runs through all of us and all of our ancestral lines. I really see it as courage and heart-centered courage, and how I set an intention to move forwards through this life. So I wanted to end with that intentionality in mind. I end these solo episodes with my notes to self, and this is based upon my journaling of reflections after I speak to my guests in the episodes. And sometimes it'll be a reflection for a past version of myself, part of myself that has died. Or sometimes, like today, it's going to be a commitment to me in the now and in the future. And today, I'm going to share my commitment to my autumnal Death on the Daily practice that I'm going to be doing as we flow into September. And this is really based upon the rituals that I've been doing since 2022, but I thought, let's formalize it. And I speak this as a you because I want these words, if they resonate with you, I want you to take these forwards, make them your own, make these your own Death on the Daily notes to self as to how you want to move through this life. Don't wait to prioritize those and that which matters the most. As you move through late summer and into autumn, watch those leaves falling and the plants on the woodland floor dying back. But alongside them, also observe for the trees who fell before their time, perhaps struck by lightning or taken down in the fierce winds, reminding you that life is precious and it's impermanent. So allow yourself to feel all that you feel as you contemplate these endings, including your own and that time when you will go back into compost. Step by step, reconnect yourself to the life cycle of nature and the very essence of you as a human of nature. So that is my commitment to myself this autumn. I'm going to be taking it out there, outside into nature for a Death on the Daily practice where I'm going to be literally observing nature and all of the dying and death that surrounds me in this cozy, warm period as we also head into the festive period. And so that completes this Notes to Self episode. If you haven't watched the tree cart episode, or actually the other conversations in the series so far, I would definitely encourage you to go and check them out, because the more that we have these conversations, the more that we understand how death shows up in each of our lives, the more richness that we can bring into how we live each day of our life well. Sending you lots and lots of love. All of my gratitude to you for joining me for another Dead Conversation. Death on the Daily is edited by David Strutt. The music is Set Free by Katie Gray. And I am Tanya Wilkinson. And if you enjoyed this episode, I would be over the moon if you can rate, review, and subscribe. It really helps me to get the word out there. And if you want to say hi or to hear more about my work as a coach and death doula, including how I support my clients to navigate their death on the daily, then all of the ways that you can connect with me are in the show notes. I'll be back soon with some more Dead Conversations. And in the meantime, take good care of yourself and others.
There's a cold fire, there's a crossfire, and there's something